Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with lesser-known works by major composers that you'll doubtless be happy that you got to know. And this is a particularly fun one because you can play it for your friends and say, who wrote that? And they're never going to get it. Not in a billion years, unless they're unbelievably geeky, like, me and some of the other people around here, or maybe Finster, right? Yes, dear? Hello? Hi? Oh, she's tired. I know. Would you get the answer? Do you think? You think? Okay, anyway, that's her. No, the person in question is Beethoven, who, we all know Beethoven, right? Well, remember, what was it, a few years ago? 10 years ago? No, maybe, I don't know, it was a while ago. It was the Beethoven year. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I don't know. Everyone did Beethoven editions. I happen to have sitting here at all times the Naxos Beethoven edition, which actually, there's some cat fur, is the most complete, I think, of all of them, to be honest with you. There's some marvelous stuff in here. But, there EMI did one, and Deutsche Grammophon did several of them, and it was just all over the place. It was Beethoven, Beethoven, Beethoven. And they were doing period instruments and regular instruments and the same stuff over and over. And of course, the popular works were issued and reissued and reissued ad nauseum. But there is a work by Beethoven, which I just think is unbelievably fun to get to know, and extraordinary and different, really very original. It's his Trio in C major, Opus 87. Now, everything about this is deceptive, because when we say trio in C major, we think, it's a piano trio or something like that. Well, no, it isn't. And when we think Opus 87, we go, it's late. It's at the same time as, the late Seventh Symphony and, violin concerto was like in the 60s or something. It's all way up there with upper middle period Beethoven. Wrong! It was actually composed in 1795 when he first came to Vienna, and he was still in his Mozart on steroids mode. He came to Vienna, he wanted to learn with Mozart, but Mozart unfortunately died, and so he got stuck with Haydn, which was hardly second best, but he was quite obnoxious, and Haydn was quite old, and, by the time they got together, which was actually later, after Haydn got back from England, at that point in 1795, Haydn was making a fortune in London, writing the London symphonies. So Beethoven was in Vienna and trying to make his way, and he wrote some really splendid and interesting chamber works, because Beethoven was very, very paranoid, and he did not want to work in genres where the competition was too obvious. That meant Mozart, first of all, string quartets and piano sonatas, and he was just feeling his oats. He was an amazing pianist, and so he could write in a virtuoso style that Mozart, for example, never matched or never attempted. And Haydn was very much alive and going like gangbusters in symphonies and string quartets, and so that was sort of out of the picture. And there was no way Beethoven was going to get a commission for like an opera or something major from the Viennese court. So he wrote some very, very, very interesting works. I mean, the early pieces like the septet, his string trios, which are masterpieces, absolute masterpieces, but they weren't competing with things that the other guys were doing so much. And where he did compete, it wasn't always to his advantage. For example, the piano and wind quintet, which, compares favorably, but certainly not better, to Mozart's piano and wind quintet, which I think is actually the finer work, and so did Tovey and a lot of other people. So what is this trio in C major, Opus 87? Well, it's scored, get this, for 2 oboes and an English horn. That's it. It is one of the honkiest pieces of music you will ever hear in your life. I mean, it's played nicely. It's not quite so honky, but it is a big work. 23, 24 minutes long in 4 substantial movements, an 11-minute sonata allegro first movement for 2 oboes and an English horn. It can be orally fatiguing. I mean, that is true. It is a quirky and interesting piece, but Beethoven obviously lavished a tremendous amount of care on writing this very, very substantial piece. Wind music is one of the great unknown areas in the classical composers because there's tons of it. Mozart wrote fabulous music for wind ensembles. Beethoven wrote some. Haydn wrote some. Everybody wrote music for wind ensembles for outdoor performance and whatnot. So there's tons and tons and tons of this stuff. But Beethoven's Opus 87 is just one of those curiosities that you really ought to know if you care about Beethoven. And early Beethoven is a rich field of discovery, because even though he was imitating Mozart and Haydn for the most part, he was doing it really well. And he was a genius at all points of his life. Maybe not a mature genius or something, but he was a genius and he knew what he was doing. And this particular trio, all 23 or 24 minutes of it for simply 2 oboes and bassoon, shows just how creative and characterful he could be in a very strange and restricted medium. And so I do have from the Naxos Beethoven edition, because I have permission to do Naxos, I can play you a sample, just a bit of the finale, which is a delightful rondo. It's about 5 minutes long. And the sample, I'll just play you the opening, the first minute or so. It's delicious and endless fun. Really, really fun. So here is the Beethoven Trio in C major for 2 oboes in English horn, Opus 87, the finale, the 4th movement. And as I said, play that for your friends. Ask them who wrote it. See if they can figure it out. It's just delightful. It really is. So that's a terrific lesser-known work by a major composer. And it's not a minor work. It's a big work. It's a serious work. All of which goes to show that there's always something to discover, even in familiar territory. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.